Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Market Bites. I'm actually going to say the exact time we're recording this because by the time it goes live on YouTube or the podcast, who knows what would have happened. It's the 4th of March and it is 2:41 p.m. in the UK. It means we've just gone through the cash open in the US. I'm joined by Neja Malk and Brett Kenwell. Neja, first of all, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, actually. Thank you. We were just discussing before we went live or started recording that nothing can surprise us anymore. Like anything can happen over the weekend, and I'm not surprised anymore. So yeah, basically that's it. That's it. How I'm feeling. So yeah, I'm just observing the situation currently. How are you guys?
Yeah, not bad. I'm the same. I'm the same. It just feels
Yeah.
like whenever we finish an episode at the moment, we say, who knows what will happen the next time we speak? And of course, a lot has happened. We'll go through that. We'll talk about the markets in a moment. But Brett, are you in the same sort of camp as us? If I ask you to predict what we're going to talk about in the next 7 days, I don't think you probably could do it with a high degree of certainty, could you?
No, I mean, less than a week ago, we were talking Nvidia, and I don't think anyone's even mentioned Nvidia these last couple days. So,
Yeah, actually, let's have a quick look at Nvidia, just very quickly. I've got the charts up in front of me. So for those that did watch that, we were talking about how it was, really on the face of it, strong report, but we came lower, and ultimately, it still sort of hasn't done anything since sort of, you could argue since really July. It's been stuck in a big range, and that's still the case. Actually, it hasn't really moved an awful amount, and I do wonder whether there are people out there that are just sort of saying with Nvidia, unless it goes a little bit lower, I'm not going to get back in again, and maybe that's just a case of just sort of waiting and see for that particular stock. But still, obviously, the number one stock in the world by market cap. The first place we'll go to is oil for this week, and we can discuss a load of other different markets too. Of course, the geopolitical situation sort of worsened a bit over the weekend. I remember, so for me, it's Sunday night. Nezha, it would be Sunday night for you, Brett. I guess it would be sort of Sunday afternoon when futures open. And I was looking to see how, of course, oil opened, how the S&P opened, and what gold was doing. And I remember seeing the headlines come through. And I have to say, I was on the face of it, I was a little bit shocked. Oil wasn't a lot higher and the S&P wasn't a lot lower. The S&P, I think, was down 1.1%, and oil was pushing into the 70s. But it's been quite tough to call this week, and we can come on to that in a moment. But just with oil, yesterday at its high, it pushed to its highest level since June last year. But I'm just looking at the chart now. Where we're trading at this exact moment is the sort of high of Monday morning. Okay, and then that is sort of 74.20. Okay, so the high we got to is around sort of 77, and the low of yesterday was 70. It's a pretty big range that oil is in at the moment. And I guess I'll come to you, Nezha, first, just on this before we go through all the other market reactions. For people out there like me that are struggling to really predict what's happening with this market, headlines wise, do you think there's anything wrong with just sitting on the sidelines sometimes?
Oh, no way. I think that's actually a smart move. We shouldn't rush to any decision, especially when it comes to some geopolitical changes, because we have to understand that this oil move is mostly driven by risk and uncertainty rather than real shortage of supply. And still global production remains strong. And if I looked at US output and it's still at all-time highs, for example, and in past geopolitical events, we had many in a year or so. And normally oil initially spiked, but then later it stabilized once markets realized that supply is still moving. So, I think that the issue with oil is that it's not affecting only oil, but also other companies, other sectors. We saw moves at airlines. Because shipping and logistic companies also it becomes more expensive when oil prices jump, which totally makes sense. But we also saw a on the other side, positive moves on some integrated producers of oil like Chevron, ExxonMobil, BP. And I mean, if you're already exposed to those companies, like good for you, because I bet that if you're not like that you couldn't predict any event like that. But if you're currently looking for exposure in one of those companies, I would think twice before I would enter, because those situations can resolve very quickly and no one knows what will happen until tomorrow or what will happen in a week time. We have no idea. So jumping to conclusions just based on one event and these moves this big, I wouldn't go for it. I don't know. How do you think, guys? Are you more short-term orientated or do you have more of a long-term
Well,
view?
I was just going to say, and Brett, I'll come to you on it. It does feel like at the moment it's a trader's market, right? It's someone who can react to the headlines, who's happy to be in and out. Yes, there's going to be some individual stocks and asset classes that benefit one way or another off of this or come under a lot of pressure. But for those that like short-term movements, Brett, it feels almost like the conditions they are after.
Yeah, if you're like a hit and run type of trader who can be in and out and are engaged and active with the market, I mean, this is a type of tape that works really well for you. But it really depends if you're longer term, more of a passive investor. It really kind of depends where you are right now. It's like I feel like the theme, going into this weekend was sort of like pockets of volatility, right? Like some sectors and some, whether that's if you look at certain countries or certain sectors in the S&P, however you want to really look at it, some were doing fine, and some were really doing quite poorly. And we've just sort of seen that continue after this event now too. It's like you look at something like the S&P, which has basically lagged all over the world, compared to like European equities, Asian equities. It's been flat all week. So it's in a way it's like surprising to not see this type of movement, and to kind of like to Nej's point, like sometimes doing nothing is really the play. In a way, it's almost like people who are invested in, like, just say the S&P hasn't moved. It's almost like going through a stretch of turbulence, right? Or like hydroplaning when you're driving. You're sort of like you're nervous, but you're just like, okay, hopefully we just settle down after this, So I don't know. It remains kind of a touch and go market, and it might sound a little crass to say, but a lot of times markets sort of overlook the geopolitical concerns when this type of thing happens, and it ends up being kind of like everyone just goes back to it was before the outbreak.
Yeah, and actually just on that, I obviously you guys are in this WhatsApp chat we have with the analysts, and I did a quiz of the day question at some point last week. What's been the best performing G7 country with their equity market? And South Korea was number one, but that's had a really poor 2.5-3 days this week. I mean, it's up incredibly from the lows of last year to the high of this year, like well over 200%. And then it's come down sort of 15-20% just this week alone. South Korea is a big importer of oil, but it goes back to the mindset, I guess, of some investors is, if before everything here that's happened this week, you were happy with your investments and the situation at some point is going to improve again, you either just continue to hold through it, or for some people it's an opportunity to maybe even add a little bit lower down, and if this situation does improve. And I have to say, with it being a headline driven market, there's a lot of conflicting headlines. You've got to be following the right people, listening to the right reports, but it's quite interesting just looking at the Korean ETF on eToro. The code is EWY, and it's already had a little bit of a bounce actually from those lows. But there's been some, as you say, really interesting moves across the board. And I'm just looking at Nasdaq now, and as Brett, you were saying, it's kind of where it started the week. If anything, a tiny bit positive, filled the gap. And if you had explained, if someone was in our Market Bites call last week and said, this is what's going to happen, over the next 7 days, and you've now got to predict where the Nasdaq is, you probably wouldn't have said it's, trading exactly where it is. And maybe that tells us a little bit about, just the sort of psychology at the moment of the investors. Every dip is still just getting bought up, isn't it, Neja?
Yeah, it was always the case. Also, last April we saw that how deep weekly was bought up. But what I'm looking forward to is our next retail investor beat,
Yeah.
because I would like to know what retail investors actually think about current dip and maybe also other dips in the future. But what will the sentiment be around that time? Because I think this will also give us some perspective on how what kind of sentiment is actually out there on the market. But it's like you mentioned Nvidia in the beginning of the episode, but did you see what happened to Samsung in the last
Yeah.
days? It's down 18%. You already shared some about Korean market drop, but I was really not expecting that, because Samsung was one of the companies that was trading at all-time highs in the past
Mm.
months. And memory is one of the hot topics on the market, and I was really, really not expecting that.
Yeah, again, I've got the Samsung chart up in front of me, but I was looking at this yesterday, and again, it's another one where that sort of move from a year ago, or the low of January last year, to the high, 350% move to the upside it had. And again, I guess for those that are invested in Samsung, you'd like to think if the stock's gone up 350%, you've taken a bit of profit along the way. But if not, then those days can be pretty hairy. But also, I guess when you have a reaction like this week, as you mentioned, it being down quite heavily, whether people just do wait for it to calm down a little bit and then just look to get in again, because they've clearly got momentum on their side, the companies like Samsung at the moment. But yeah, incredible move across the board there. I think something that's been quite interesting, I mean, has been the movement in gold. And at times it spiked higher, and then it dropped lower quite considerably, and it's now trading where we were, whatever the 22nd of February is. When is that? I'm just going to bring up my calendar, 'cause that feels like it should be, yeah, just sort of, well, almost last Monday. We're kind of where we were then on the 23rd, and you could argue over just over a week and a half it's done nothing, but there's been a lot that's gone on. I think some people out there would be confused at that reaction of gold going down. I mean, do any of you have a sort of an opinion on that? Do you think it's a case of sometimes, it could be, rushing to the sidelines to sort of cover yourself? Do you feel it's a little bit of that, Brett? Do you think it's a little bit of confusion? I mean, how are you seeing it?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I don't know. It's like everything is moving in such different extreme ways. Like, to see the move in oil, to see the move in the dollar. Maybe the move in the dollar kind of explains some of the tepid response in gold that you'd typically expect, like a sort of a safe haven response initially. And then what did we pull in, like 4 or 5% yesterday alone? I think bouncing a little bit today, but yeah, like gold's been, the volatility within the precious metal trade has been pretty extreme, just this year in general. I think this is just like the latest, I guess sticking with the turbulence, like the latest bumps to sort of navigate for those investors.
Yeah, Nesh, are you the same sort of react? I mean, for gold, would anything you would add there?
Uh, yeah, like the if we look at the situation with the world is right now, you would expect gold or and silver trading higher. At least I would, if I would open the chart. But yesterday we saw quite a bit of a move on the opposite in the opposite direction. It went down quite a bit, and also mining stocks went down. But as Brett already mentioned, it's also tied to a US dollar, which strengthened sharply, and gold usually moves to the opposite direction of dollar, because it is priced in dollar globally. Yeah, so I think that's also gold initially, when something happens in the world, it reacts very positively to that, because it is kind of a safe haven to investors. But once the risk is kind of processed by investors, we can see a bit of a drop. And I think that's the case right now, because investors start seeking opportunities elsewhere. At least that's my take.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm with you on that. I agree.
Yeah,
Brett,
and I wonder too,
how
some of
much would the
these,
market care about
oh, sorry,
non-farm
Sam.
payrolls on Friday, given everything that's going on? Is it still important?
Man, it's nice to at least get the U.S. data on a more regular cadence. That was a frustrating couple of months with the shutdown and the havoc from that. I mean, I hope so. Like, I hope it goes back to sort of being the sort of focal point of the economic readings. You know, payrolls was the most important number for years. I feel like that importance kind of started to share the spotlight with inflation. Not to put inflation out, like it doesn't matter, but employment in the U.S. is such an enormous driver of the economy. Like two-thirds of U.S. GDP is personal consumptions. That doesn't happen if you don't have a job. So I feel like I would love to see the jobs sort of regain that spotlight. And I guess on that note, last month wasn't like a great number by the standards of the past few years, but when we look at the past few quarters, last month was a pretty good number. So if we could, sort of build on that momentum, one data point is really not enough to like change your thesis and say, oh, we're in the all clear. Two data points really isn't enough to do that either, but it at least would be another step in the right direction. Hoping we get a good number.
Yeah, yeah. Fingers will be crossed for that. Of course, that comes out this Friday for everyone wondering. Also, for those people, Nezha, out there that have been keeping an eye on X and all of these news sites for updates this week, you know, unless you're following the right people, it is tough. We mentioned that. How do you go about it? What sources are you looking at, listening to that others may be able to do it, other than of course the Market Bites podcast?
Yeah, for me, I'm following the news, of course I am, but I think if you follow too many news and you are kind of, they're all around you. It's really important that you follow those specific accounts on X, on social media that really share different perspectives on the stories out there. Because if you get only one view on the stories that are trending, I think there's no point. I'd like to see opposite views on the situation that is out there. And obviously, I'm following all eToro analysts because all of them are covering different regions in the world, and I mean they have the best view on the specific markets. That's one of the things. Also, to find good accounts on X, I would recommend you to see who are people that you are following. So,
Yes.
I mean, Sam, you have some amazing accounts that you are following, and they are sharing like very valuable information. And if you surround yourself with accounts like that, with news like that, you will be up to date, and maybe you won't make any rush decisions in situations like that, because no one can really tell you for sure what to invest in right now to get a positive outcome.
Yeah, I think that's important. One, your point about seeing balanced views, and then two, also just understanding that no one's got the magic eight ball here to shake and give you the exact answer of what is going to happen. And sometimes just having no position or not adjusting your positions too crazily, too hastily is actually the smarter move to do. It's been quite interesting as well in our analyst chat, and obviously Toro taking a big step with AI and just sort of looking to build all these apps and that kind of thing as well, and working with the agents to work on practice portfolios for these type of given situations. I think that is something really exciting about the future, where people on eToro or elsewhere, whatever, if something does happen like this, they can immediately have an understanding of what portfolio would make sense if X, Y, Z happens, and how their portfolio may be at risk, or how they could benefit from a certain move in the market. I think it's only going one direction, which is positively on that. So that's quite exciting at the moment as well. Any other moves in the market that caught your attention at all, Brett? I mean, what's your focus for the rest of the week here?
Focus for the rest of the week. I'm pretty interested to see Broadcom's number. I feel like sometimes they can get sort of, I don't know, not displaced, not ignored, but at $1.5 trillion market cap, they do seem to somehow fly under the radar still. So curious to see what they report, more importantly, how they react. We just saw Nvidia last week. Great numbers, solid guidance. Stock went down after Broadcom, sort of a similar boat. It's really been going nowhere for a few months. I think it's been down 3 months in a row. It's just sort of, consolidating, it looks like, but it'd be interesting to see the reaction to that number. I think that and non-farms will be the two things I'm watching closely this week. What about you guys?
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. I mean, we talked, didn't we, on a podcast last year, how if there was to be a Mag 8, Broadcom could
Yeah.
potentially be the one to be brought in. And listen, you obviously you mentioned it, not pushing higher, but it's only like what 20% away from its all-time high, and I wonder, good earnings, that looks a lot better, doesn't it, if it can get back above 322, just from a technical point of view, for those that are looking at it. Neja, what's your focus? Is it similar to Brett? Is it Broadcom? Is it NFP? Is it just waiting to see what happens with the markets?
Waiting, most of it is waiting, but there is also one company out there that I'm still keeping an eye on, and that's Costco. It's not maybe the most interesting AI bet out there, but still, this is one of the companies that I always keep my eye on. I like to see how consumers are behaving, and I think that those big companies can really provide us insight on that. So Costco will be one of my, they are reporting earnings tomorrow. So this will be one of probably my highlights of the week. By the way, I forgot to ask you guys, I'm not following crypto that closely as you might do. What's your review on Bitcoin at the moment?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm if it was a school report, I'd be very pleased with how it's performed this week. And again, if you go back 7 days ago, you say what's going to happen, you kind of just would be like, it's probably going to be a little bit lower. And that just hasn't been the case, hardly affected over the weekend, really. And has pushed on. We're now trading above $72,000. And I think that's a real win for Bitcoin. Admittedly, for it to, really, I think, get my attention as okay, the low could be in. I want to see it above 74,000. So we're not too far away from that. That's the low that we had from March last year, and of course we're still below that. If we get back above 74,000 to close the week, I would then start to feel quite, confident from a technical point of view that the low could well be in. So I think it's behaved well. I mean, on one side you can say, well, oil prices haven't really done anything, closing price for 2-3 days now. A lot of volatility in between. The Nasdaq and S&P are either flat or a little bit up for the week at the time of recording. Gold is trading where it did last Monday. So in some respects, it's like, well, maybe we aren't actually expecting this to be too bad. Maybe a lot of the markets maybe kind of expected this a little bit to have happened. But, Bitcoin, I was looking at the chart yesterday. It hasn't had 2 positive weeks back to back since September last year, which is a long time away. And at the moment, would be its first positive week since the first week of January. So you could also say it's exhausted from the selling. Okay, I'd understand that. But if we can get back above 74,000, I think things would look a lot better. It's obviously come a long way from that all-time high. I mean, to the low that we had on the 2nd of February that week, we were down 52%. So, a little bit of a bounce, understandable. But I feel like, Brett, and I don't know if you want to add anything here, it does feel like this is not just a small win for Bitcoin and crypto in general. It could be quite meaningful if it lasts.
Definitely. I mean, when the attack started over the weekend, when tensions were up, everyone's, how's the market going to open on Monday? Bitcoin was flat through the weekend, and not like, oh, it was a huge range and ended flat. It was really just flat and quiet. And that, to me, was a little bit of a tell. Obviously not a predictor that it would continue to actually do pretty good this week, but just the fact that it wasn't rolling over like a risk asset, like a tech stock, was certainly promising from my observation. I do think it's interesting that Bitcoin and crypto has struggled to start this year. You look at something like software struggled to start this year, and both of those groups are the ones that held up this week through the selling. So, or through the volatility, I guess I should say. But yeah, it's an interesting price action for sure, and it's promising at least.
Yeah, I'm with you. Right, we'll wrap it up there for this week at 3:05 p.m. UK time, because who knows what's around the corner. Just trying to save ourselves a little bit of face there. But Nezha and Brett, as always, it's great to have you on. Who knows what will be the case in 7 days, but I hope everyone keeps safe, and hopefully we informed you a little bit about the situation and the psychology there as well. Thank you guys for joining us, and see you all soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, guys.